High above Lancaster sits a park that's home to an Edwardian building, the last ruins of an old observatory, views from Morecambe Bay to the Lake District Fells, and over 150 years of history. Welcome to Williamson Park. The hill that is known as Williamson Park was originally open moorland on the edge of Lancaster. It wasn't public land in the modern sense. Moorland was usually owned by local estates or private landowners. It was also known as Gallows Hill because executions were carried out there. By the 18th and early 19th century, it became a major sandstone quarry. This is what carved the steep drops, ridges, and uneven ground that still shape the park today. During the Lancashire cotton famine, unemployed mill workers were paid to create gravel drives, paths, and stone benches across the abandoned quarry land. This is the first documented moment the land was intentionally reshaped for public use. This work happened because the quarry was no longer profitable, leaving the hill unstable and dangerous. James Williamson I bought the land around the old quarry. His son James Williamson II, later known as Lord Ashton, funded the major landscaping phase in the 1870s to 1880s. During this period, woodland was planted, paths were laid out, viewpoints were created, the Temple of the Winds was built, and the quarry scars softened into Victorian picturesque landscape. This is when the land truly became a park, not just a reclaimed quarry. In 1881, the Williamson family handed the landscaped land to Lancaster Corporation. That legal transfer is the moment it officially became Williamson Park. The Temple of the Winds is a 19th century stone viewing point built decades before the Ashton Memorial. It sits on a natural high ridge of the hill facing out toward Morecambe Bay and the Lakeland Fells. Victorians loved these little classic temples because they framed a view and gave people a place to stop, rest and look out over the landscape. It's not a temple in the religious sense, it's a viewing pavilion, part of the early landscaping of the park. The name comes from the classical idea of a temple of the winds, which appears in Greek and Roman architecture. It doesn't measure wind or do anything scientific. It's simply placed on an exposed ridge where the wind hits you from every direction. The Victorians borrowed the name because it sounded elegant and matched the style. Before the Ashton Memorial existed, the Temple of the Winds was the main viewpoint on the hill. When the memorial was built in the early 1900s, it took over the summit, but the temple stayed because it was already a popular stopping point. It marked the earlier phase of the park's design. It framed a different angle of the landscape, and it sat on a natural outcrop the memorial couldn't use. Located at the summit of Williamson Park is a landmark known as Ashton Memorial. It is a large Edwardian folly built between 1907 and 1909 and was designed as a memorial tower by Lord Ashton, a wealthy industrialist who who owned the land that later became Williamson Park. It was built in memory of his wife Jessie, who died in 1904, and Lord Ashton wanted a permanent, highly visible tribute to her. The cost was around £87,000 at the time, roughly equivalent to 10.5 million today. It opened on the 24th of October 1909, and the memorial was his way of marking her death with a public, lasting structure. The paintings inside the dome of the Ashton Memorial were created by George Murray, who was commissioned by Lord Ashton and wanted the interior to reflect the cultural ambitions of Lancaster and the Edwardian belief in progress and civic pride. So Murray's murals were designed to elevate the memorial beyond a simple tribute and turn it into a statement of Lancaster's identity. The paintings sit in the 4 curved panels of the dome interior, each one representing a different facet of human achievement. They were intended to be seen from the central hall, lit by the natural light from the arched windows. They're one of the most overlooked parts of the building, but they're original to the 1907-1909 construction. The hall inside the Ashton Memorial is used today as a public event space, and weddings are one of its main functions. The building is no longer just a memorial, it's actively hired out for ceremonies, concerts, exhibitions, and private events. You can walk all the way around the outside at the very top, because the Ashton Memorial was deliberately built with a first floor outdoor viewing gallery, which is a full circular balcony designed as a public lookout point. It is a wraparound stone terrace that sits above the main hall and below the copper dome. Architect John Belcher designed it as a 360-degree viewing platform, so visitors could see Lancaster and Morecambe Bay, the Lakeland Fells, and the Bowland Hills. The memorial is about 150 feet tall, which is why it dominates the Lancaster skyline and can be seen from miles away. It's a Grade 1 listed building, the highest level of protection in the UK, given on the 22nd December 1953. Grade 1 status is reserved for buildings of exceptional interest. Only about 2.5% of listed buildings qualify. In 2012, on the 400th anniversary of the Pendle Witch Trials, 10 waymarkers were placed across Lancashire, tracing the 51-mile route the accused women were forced to walk. Turret number 9 stands here in Williamson Park, looking directly toward Lancaster Castle, the place where the Pendle witches were condemned and hanged. This marker honours Anne Whittle. Her tercet reads, "Grim skies, the grey remorse of rain, sunsets crimson shame, 4 seasons, centuries, turning in Lancashire." Fenham Carr is a wooded nature reserve area on the eastern side of Williamson Park. It wasn't a part of the original Victorian or Edwardian landscape at all. It was only added in the late 1990s. It includes ponds, woodland trails, habitats for birds, bats and small mammals, and a quieter, wilder section compared to the ornamental core of the park. It feels very different from the Ashton Memorial side because it wasn't designed as a showpiece, it's more of a conservation space. When Fenham Carr was added, it increased the size of the park to 54 acres. At the summit of Williamson Park, opposite the Ashton Memorial, is a butterfly house. This started life in 1909 as an Edwardian palm house, built in the same era as the Ashton Memorial. It was a part of the park's early 20th century development, designed to house exotic plants rather than animals. In 1949, the palm house was damaged by a fire, leaving it unusable for decades. It stood empty or underused for a long time, which is why older locals remember it as a derelict glass house rather than an attraction. The building was restored in 1985, and this is when it became the tropical environment people know today. The restoration converted the palm house into a rainforest-style habitat with exotic butterflies, koi carp, tortoises, tropical plants and small birds. Alongside the butterfly house, the park added a mini zoo with meerkats, marmosets, guinea pigs, rabbits and mini beasts. This wasn't a part of the original Edwardian design. It grew gradually as the park expanded its family attractions. By the late 20th century, the butterfly house and the mini zoo had become one of Lancaster's main tourist draws. Today, both the butterfly house and the mini zoo are temporarily closed for essential repairs and improvements. There is currently no opening date, and animals remain on site and cared for. The closure is due to the age of the building and the specialist systems needed for tropical species. The Victorian planting scheme at Williamson Park sits on top of the park's earlier identity as a quarry and moorland, and it was shaped by two forces: the need to stabilise the damaged landscape and the Victorian taste for engineered, picturesque woodland. By the mid-1800s, the hill had been heavily quarried for sandstone, used across Lancaster's Georgian and Victorian buildings. When the Lancashire cotton famine hit, 1861 to 1865, the unemployed mill workers were hired to begin turning the scarred ground into public landscape, creating access routes and early paths. This laid the groundwork for the later, more intentional Victorian planting. In the 1870s to the 1880s, James Williamson I funded extensive landscaping, and the park was formally laid out by the designer McLean. The planting choices were practical as much as aesthetic. The Victorians selected species that could stabilise quarry edges, establish quickly on disturbed ground, create a dense canopy, and withstand exposed hilltop conditions. This is why the core Victorian woodland is dominated by beech, lime, sycamore and Scots pine. These species form the backbone of the park's woodland. The planting scheme wasn't ornamental in a way later Edwardian parks were. It was restorative landscaping. Beech and lime created tall cohesive canopies, sycamore tolerated poor thin soils left by quarrying, and Scots pine anchored the most exposed slopes. Together they softened the industrial scars and created the wooded character that frames the Ashton Memorial today. The Victorian planting is still visible in the continuous woodland belt around the memorial. The steep shaded paths cut through the old quarry faces, and the surviving Victorian era stands in Fenham Car, which was later added to the park but retains the same species. The modern woodland management plan still recognises these areas as a historic landscape layer. Hidden in the woods at Williamson Park are the remains of a lost Victorian astronomical observatory, also known as the Gregg Observatory. It was built in 1892 by the Lancaster Corporation to house a set of scientific instruments that were donated by Albert Gregg, whose family ran the great cotton mills at Quarry Bank. The instruments had belonged to John Gregg, who kept them in a private observatory at his home in Escobec. After his death, the Gregg family gave the equipment to the city so that it could be used for public education and the study of the night sky. The building that stood here wasn't a dome like modern observatories. It had a transit room, a telescope porch and a viewing room, all designed for precise astronomical work. When it opened, the ceremony was led by Dr. Ralph Copeland, who was the Astronomer Royal for Scotland and a sign of how important this site once was. But over the decades, interest faded and there were arguments over who should run it, which led to the instruments falling out of use and the building slowly declined. By around 1960, the observatory was demolished, leaving only the stone outline you can see today. These foundations are all that remain of Lancaster's public observatory, a forgotten link between the city, Victorian science, and one of the Northwest's great industrial families.